Huma, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Thank you for having us.
I'm so excited that you're here to talk about Naseeha, because Naseeha has been around, I understand, since 2006, and it's just flourished and grown, and it's become a very well-known name within the Muslim community in Toronto. So tell me more about Naseeha. What is Naseeha and why did it begin?
So Naseeha is a mental health organization that is focused on the Muslim community. It actually did start, like you said, in 2006, but at that time and for several years after, it really was focused on being a helpline. And while we still continue to have that part of our services, we have expanded. So in terms of the helpline, it is an anonymous, non-judgmental, confidential phone line that you can call in. Anyone can call in.
And it's free, right?
And it's free. And you don't need to tell us your name. You don't need to tell us your background, where you live. And you'll be connected to someone who understands where you're coming from in terms of the cultural and religious context. And you're able to basically talk about what you're going through, get that support that you might need, as well as some strategies, and if needed, actual extra resources that can be referred to in their local communities. We have now expanded to add in a text service, which I think is really important.
Yeah, because people don't even call anymore.
Exactly.
People text, right?
So we are trying to kind of be where the community is moving towards, right?
So who answers these calls, the phone calls and the texts?
So it is a peer-to-peer model, meaning it's not necessarily mental health professionals. Some of them are. But what we do is we look for people who are interested in the field, and then we onboard them by doing multiple rounds of training to make sure that it meets industry standards in terms of what's required. We go through mock calls, and even once they've been trained up and are on the phone lines, they continue to have regular training every 2-3 months.
Do you log the calls to try and listen to what, record the calls to try and understand what's going on with the dynamics between the individual listening and the individual talking about their problems?
So what we do is we have call logs, meaning so after the counselor has taken the call, they fill out just some basic information if the caller was comfortable telling them in terms of age range, maybe even the city, and just get a sense of what they're calling in about, so we can get some ideas of how we can improve our services.
So what sort of issues do you see popping up regularly amongst people who are calling? I understand it's primarily Muslim youth who are calling or texting. Is that it?
I will be honest, it's a wide range of ages, which it did start off primarily focused on Muslim youth, but we saw when we started looking more at the numbers was that we saw the age was going from early teens, adolescents, going into people's in their 40s and their 50s. So we realized that there is a definite need in the community. That being said, the ranges of issues that people call about also drastically differ. So it can be about relationships, spiritual issues, substance use, mental illness, self-harm. So the reasons vary drastically across
So the same issues that all Canadians are experiencing. Yeah.
Sure.
So how do you deal with those issues? So let's say somebody calls and has an emergency issue that they need to get out of the house. They're experiencing domestic abuse or something like that. How would you deal with that?
So depending on the nature of the call, I mean, if they're an adult and there's no children involved, then we try to work with them at where they're at, encourage them to access services such as calling 911 depending on the need that's present, to kind of give them the power to make those decisions, because I think that is really important, to work with them at where they're at.
Now, you've said that a lot of these issues are similar to the issues that all Canadians have. So what is the point of having Naseeha? What is the point of having a Muslim organization dealing with mental health?
The reason this came about is that, and I still think there is a big need in our community to have culturally accessible services. And that's in the Muslim community as well as other minority communities. Studies have consistently shown that marginalized communities have more barriers in accessing mental health services. So this is one way for us to try to work on removing those barriers. We do find that most of the people that call, even if they're not necessarily practicing Muslims, they want someone who understands the background in terms of how their families are set up, how the culture works. So that can often make people more comfortable, where they might not get that same comfort when calling more mainstream helplines or accessing mainstream services.
So the person might not understand their family, their culture, that sort of thing.
For sure.
Yeah. So let's say somebody calls with a problem. Do you offer religious solutions? Do you say, well, there are these opinions, these different interpretations of the Quran that you could take? Is that sort of advice that you give?
No. So we try to stay away from doing that, as our role is to be a faith-based informed service, meaning we will say, you know what, if you would like to pray, that's a good idea, but we don't say this is how you pray, for example, or these are the rules
or you
when
should
it
pray.
comes.
You don't
exactly.
say you should pray. Okay.
We work with them where they're at. When it comes to religion, it's not necessary that we bring it in unless they want it to be brought in. And when it comes to those, there are people that might call in wanting to know rulings. And what we do is then we refer them to local imams and sheikhs that can answer that, because that's within their specialty. So we do our best, and it is our purpose to stay within our lane, which is to provide support to the Muslims that are calling in.
What sort of demand do you have for your services?
Well, it's definitely expanding and increasing, which is why we've recently in the last year, we've increased our service from 7 days a week, 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because there was that demand. And with the tech service, it's Monday to Friday, 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. just to start. But our hope is to continue to expand that in order to not have people calling and it goes unanswered.
So is every call and every text responded to?
So right now, for example, if you call in, we might have 2 or 3 counselors on, but if there's more people that are calling in, unfortunately, we're unable to take that call on.
Wow.
So our hope is that we're never having to have people have unanswered calls.
What about the Muslim community as a whole within Canada? Have they been supportive of Naseeha? I mean, I understand that there's some stigma associated with mental health, right? So how has the Muslim community responded to your organization and your work?
I think they've been increasingly supportive. I think that it's gotten to a point where it's hard to ignore that the Muslim community is not immune to mental health concerns. So we've had a lot of connections and talks and workshops that's been done in local mosques, at Islamic schools, community centers. We've had many organizations asking us to whether do talks or send our contact information to put up posters, as they know there's a need in the community and they want to be able to promote that.
Tell me about other organizations that you've contacted or been partnering with. I understand the Toronto District School Board is one of them. So are there other organizations as well? So
we've actually been increasingly, it's not just focused on the local mosques and Islamic schools anymore. So in recent couple of years, we have been invited to speak at the Toronto District School Board, other local school boards, York University, Centennial College. We've done training with the YMCA. So there is an increasing demand for culturally sensitive and appropriate take on what the community needs. So it's been nice to see that there has been a demand and need for it, but that just shows that Naseeha is such an essential service in our community.
What are the future plans for Naseeha?
So, I mean, for me, I think it is, I would love for it to be 24/7, right? So if you want to call at, 2 in the morning, that someone is there for you. We'd like to be able to add in more languages, because we know that's a barrier as well. So to be able to add in more languages, as well as having on-site counseling. So right now, we don't have the capability and the resources to have direct counseling. What we currently are trying to do is have support groups starting. We try to do informal, what we call Naseeha circles at university levels to start that conversation. And because there is a need to have on-site services, so our hope would be to increase the on-site presence of Naseeha in varying areas in the community.
Such important work that you're doing, Huma. Thank you so much for joining me, and I wish all the best for Naseeha. I hope that it grows and it flourishes in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.